Hello and welcome to Dan Explains. My name is Dan. If you watched my 10th video on time travel, which really isn't needed to understand this one, I mentioned you can't travel back in time, but you can change things in the past that haven't been determined yet. This was done through an experiment known as the delayed choice quantum eraser. A lot of people like to call this changing the past. Let me explain why. First off, if you haven't watched my 2nd, 5th, 6th, and 17th videos, please go and watch them now. Unless, that is, you're already familiar with the double slit experiment and quantum entanglement. I've actually put those videos as part of a playlist. This video is the 5th video in the series and builds on those. Link in the description. If you recall from my 17th video on the double slit experiment, you can't figure out which slit any individual photon came through without causing the wave function to collapse, which ends up resulting in the photons acting as particles rather than waves. So, instead of the interference pattern, you just get two lines projected. In a nutshell, what the delayed quantum eraser allows you to do is decide whether you're going to cause the wave function to collapse in a double slit experiment after you've already checked to see if it did or did not collapse. You heard that right. You're able to decide whether the light coming from a double slit is going to make a wave pattern or a simple two-slit collapse pattern after the light has already hit the detector. You would think this would allow you to send information into the past, but it doesn't. Let's go over how the experiment works. Now, I'd like to use cats, like I have in some of my other videos, to make this easier to understand. But, like I pointed out in my 17th video, you'd need a setup the size of a galaxy to create an interference pattern with cats. Anyway, you start with a laser and a double slit, just like the regular double slit experiment. On the other side of the slit, you put a special crystal and a prism. I'm not going to go into the details of what they are, but what they do is split the photons that come out of both the slits in such a way that each photon is split into two entangled photons. Watch my 6th video for more on entanglement. The entangled photons then are forced to diverge into two beams. Because we're working with a double slit, the results are two sets of two beams coming out of the crystal. Each beam in the set comes from a different slit. Red for the top slit, blue for the bottom. One set of beams is converged using a lens after which they hit a detector, labeled here as D0. Because they converged, the slit they came through is not known once the photons hit the detector. So, in the absence of the other two beams, the light at D0 should create an interference pattern like a normal double slit experiment. In the meantime, the other set of beams with its photons head off towards a prism that causes them to diverge more. Each one of these beams then hits separate beam splitters, labeled here BSA and BSB, that split them 50-50. The photons have two choices once they hit the splitters. They can be reflected into detectors or continue past. An important note here is that these beam splitters are further from the slits than detector D0. So, the photons' entangled pairs have already met their fate at detector D0 before these photons hit the beam splitters. Let's ignore the photons that pass through the splitters for a moment. Anyway, if the photons get deflected into the detectors, one for each beam, you can tell which slits the photon came through by which detector detected it. As you can see from the diagram, detector D4 can only detect photons from the top slit, and detector D3 can only detect photons from the bottom slit. Based on the timing of when the photons hit each detector, you can backtrack and figure out which slit each photon's entangled partner came from, because it was entangled and split after it came through the slits. So, what would you expect the pattern at D0 to look like? Have we gamed the system enough to see an interference pattern? Nope. At D0, we see a traditional diffuse pattern like we'd see if we had put a detector in between the slits and D0. That's a bit crazy if you think about it. It's as if the photon that hit D4 or D3 sent a message back in time to its entangled partner before it hit D0 and told it where it was going to go. It gets even crazier. Let's look at the rest of this apparatus now. If the photons pass through the beam splitters, BSA and BSB, they hit two mirrors, logically called MA and MB. These mirrors direct the beams to another beam splitter, BSC. BSC combines the beams in such a way that forgets which slit the photons came through. As you can see, if you detect a hit on either detectors, D1 or 2, you can't tell which slit it came from anymore. The information has been erased. You can probably guess at this point, if you backtrack the photons that hit D1 and D2 to their entangled pairs that hit D0, you do see a double slit interference pattern. If you replace splitters BSA and BSB with mirrors you can turn on and off, then you can control whether the photons have their which way information erased or detected after their entangled partners have already hit detector D0. By activating the mirrors, which should remove the interference pattern on D0, or by deactivating the mirrors, causing an interference pattern to be detected at D0. Remember, when you're turning the mirror on and off to preserve or erase the photon's information, their entangled partners have already hit detector D0 and either displayed an interference pattern or not. Theoretically, you could redirect the photons to bounce off a mirror on the planet Pluto after they left the crystal that splits and entangles them, but before the photons hit the prism labeled PS. This would delay the choice of keeping or erasing the photon's information for about a day. If you turn the mirrors on and off, you'd think you could use Morse code or something like that to create or destroy the interference pattern to send information a day into the past. However, I have neglected to mention the reason why you have two detectors on the eraser side. That is detector D1 and 2. If instead of using two mirrors in beam splitter BSC to erase your information, we use only one detector and a lens like the one which combines the beams for detector D0, we don't end up seeing an interference pattern. In fact, at D0, we never actually see an interference pattern. We have to backtrack the fate of each entangled photon from detector 1 and 2 to reconstruct the interference pattern at D0. This is because the interference patterns at D1 and 2 are overlapping mirror images of each other. They combine perfectly to hide the interference pattern. So, you have to know whether an individual photon hit D1 or 2 before you can unscramble the pattern at D0. To put it another way, the information of which set of detectors each photon's entangled partner hit is encoded in the photon that hit D0, even if it takes a day for that decision to be made. However, until you know which photon hit which detector, you can't unscramble the message recorded at D0 the day before. So, you can't use this to talk to the past. However, this does show a decision made in the present can affect the outcome of an event in the past if the result of that event hasn't been determined yet. Similar to my Schrodinger's entangled cats thought experiment in video 6. The main takeaway from this video is that an entangled system basically represents an event or set of events that happened in the past whose outcome hasn't been decided yet. And you can set up scenarios where decisions you make while disentangling the system actually has an effect on what happened when the system was created. Again, going back to my 6th video, when you have 2 boxes, one on Mars and one on Mercury, with 2 cats, one in each box, which are entangled with each other. The decision of whether you have the black cat or the white cat is made when you open the box, even though the actual event that split the cats up happened back on Earth when the boxes were divided. As weird as it sounds, the quantum eraser is equivalent to essentially getting to pick which cat you have in your box just before opening it, thereby getting to decide an event that could have happened years ago. So, as it turns out, you're not changing the past, you're just helping it make up its mind. If you like this video, please press the like button, subscribe to my channel, and ding the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Also, please support me on Patreon, link in the description. The more people who support me, the more time I can dedicate to making videos like this one. So, until next time, have a great week.